Okay guys, welcome to your answers and explanation of activity 2 control structure scenarios. So a lot of you are asking for a bit of a tutorial on how we got to the answers. And look, I'm sorry, control structures are actually quite difficult to teach, not face to face. So that's all good. I'm more than happy to do another Zoom, maybe even with a whiteboard in our next lesson if anyone wants a little bit more info on this. But basically from the other day, the scenarios that I gave you, an aircon stays on if it's less than 24 degrees, otherwise it turns off. Now, initially from the outset, an aircon stays off if it's less than 24 degrees, otherwise it turns off. That kind of sounds like a selection control structure, hey? But if you think about it and look at it a little bit more, it's not actually an if statement. So this is the biggest common mistake, and I've actually written out the pseudocode for this. So, if you thought, okay, begin, if aircon is less than 24 degrees, keep it on, else turn it off, end. That seems like a really logical answer to this question. The mistake in this logic is a really common mistake that software design students make, and it's the fact that an if statement just lets one decision to be made at a point in time. So what this logic will do is it'll check if the aircon's less than 24 degrees, and if it is, it'll keep it on, else it'll turn it off, and that's it. It checks that once. There's one check that gets made. But if you look at the scenario, it says an aircon will stay on if it's less than 24 degrees, otherwise it'll turn off. That's more than just one check. It's constantly checking. So actually, when you look at it, this is the correct logic. It's actually a pre-test loop, okay? And you want to keep looping around this logic, don't we? We want to constantly check if it's less than 24 degrees. So I'm not just making a decision. It's not a selection control structure. It's a repetition control structure, and it's a pre-test loop. So, again, the same, begin and end. Begin to aircon. While aircon is less than 24 degrees, keep it on. Now, this will keep looping around while this condition here is true. When that condition is false, oops, actually I've forgotten a line here. Turn aircon off. I've forgotten a line of logic here, sorry. It will keep the aircon on, and this will keep on looping and repeating around. It won't break out of this loop until the aircon is greater than 25 degrees, and then it'll turn it off. Does that make sense, guys? Okay, so this, I actually want to keep the aircon on, and I want to keep it on if it's less than 25 degrees. Okay, as soon as it's more than 25 degrees, I want to turn it off. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Now I've realized that this second scenario is actually quite difficult. Again, it is a pre-test loop, it's a while loop, but it's a little bit more complicated, and I'm just going to push it down here to show you. Now, I've said a user has to enter a password to unlock their device. A user may enter their password up to 3 times. So again, I've used this as an example a couple of times. The phone unlock is obviously a pre-test loop. So this is obvious. While I've done less than 3 attempts, allow the user to an attempt to unlock it. Now, a little bit of logic that is probably a little bit different that you might not be used to is that, logically, if I'm giving them 3 times, I have to keep track of those 3 times. So I have to be able to count or save that number to a variable. So in this example, I've actually saved the value of 1. I've made a variable called attempts, and I've assigned it a value of 1. So I've said while attempts is less than 3, allow the user to attempt an unlock and add 1 to attempts. So on the first round of this, I've set attempts to 1, so attempts is 1. While it's less than 3, it's 1, so it is. Allow them to unlock and add 1. Okay, and that's fine. That works for the moment. So now it's on 2, and I roll back around. So while attempts is less than 3, allow user to unlock, add 1 to attempts. Now attempts is less than 3. And the issue becomes here is when I actually go to, attempt to unlock again, I've only had 2 chances. I'm going to be pulled out of this loop. That's actually not going to work. It's a bit of an issue, okay? So the other thing happens as well is, so first off, this logic is wrong because it only allows 2 turns. But secondly, there's another issue. Say I go through the first time, begin phone unlock, set attempts to be 1. While attempts is less than 3, which it is, it's 1, allow the user to attempt to unlock, add 1 to attempts. Now this repeats again. What happens if my user got their password correct on the first round? What if on the first iteration they somehow got it correct? This logic doesn't account for that. It just keeps looping and looping and looping and looping and looping and looping and looping. Yeah? There is an issue with that logic. So this is actually the correct logic, and I know this looks super complicated. I realize in hindsight this was a pretty mean example to give you. You'll notice what's different is I have this other condition, and it's called this other variable that I've set, and it's called unlock, okay? And I'm just going to highlight, and I might just make, I'm just going to highlight the amount of times we see unlock. This is all that's different in this algorithm, okay? So first off, there's a couple of things. So I've changed while attempts is less than or equal to 3, because, last time when it was less than, if I actually went through the logic, it only allowed me 2 times. So I need less than or equal to 3, which will give me the 3rd loop. But I've also added this thing, otherwise everything is the same. I've added this thing called unlock variable. And you'll notice that now my while loop has 2 conditions. So while attempts is less than or equal to 3, which is pretty similar to the first one, and unlock is false. Now I set unlock to be false before the loop begins. What it will allow me to do is, this actually should be on the next row, sorry. There you go, that's a little bit better. What it'll allow me to do is enter that while loop, while attempts, so when they haven't attempted it 3 times, and unlock is false, so it's set to false at the start. I might just make sure that's consistent. Yeah, so it's set to false at the start, so this first loop should happen. Allow the user to attempt to unlock. But if their password is correct, I'm then set the unlock variable, and I can even write this, set unlock variable to be true. Add 1 to attempts, and then jump here, then go for my next loop. Now what I'll notice, so say I do it the first time and I get my password correct. So I'm on my first round, attempts is 1, I'm allowed to go in. Unlock is also set to false, so on the first round it is false. Allow the user to attempt to unlock. If my password is correct, say I entered it correctly, set unlock to be true, add 1 to attempts, so attempts is now 2, and loop back around again. However, because I've set unlock to be true, while attempts is less than or equal to 3, unlock is now true because I got my password right on the first time. Unlock isn't false, so it will break out of this entire while loop and go down here. If unlock is true, unlock the phone. Sweet, amazing, okay? That's what I need. Say I put my password in wrong 2 times, all times, 3 times. So I set attempts to be 1, unlock is false, while attempts, so attempts is 1, while attempts is less than or equal to 3, it is, and unlock is false, which it is. Allow the user to attempt to unlock. Okay, say my password's wrong, that's none of this. If my password is wrong, this won't get chosen on this round. This will not get an option because if password is correct, I unlock it. If it doesn't meet that condition, it just bypasses that if statement. I add 1 to attempts, so attempts is now 2. So while attempts is less than or equal to 3, it's 2, so it is. And unlock is false. Unlock hasn't changed because I haven't enacted that if statement. Allow the user to attempt to unlock. Say I get it wrong again. I add 1 to attempts. Attempts is now 3, and I loop back around to the top. While attempts is less than or equal to 3, it's 3, so that solves my problem from last time. And unlock is false, it's still false. Allow the user to attempt to unlock, add 1 to attempts, so attempts is now 4. It's still wrong, my password's still wrong. When I roll around to here, while attempts is less than or equal to 3, it's 4, so that condition isn't met. Even though unlock is still false, that condition isn't met. Because it's that and that, it jumps out of this loop, yeah, and it goes, if unlock is true, it's not, else I disable my phone. So that was actually a bit of a hard one in hindsight, guys, but that is the logic for the phone unlock. Much, much easier one, okay, 2 much easier ones. They're the control structure for the basketball player. So the basketball player needs to keep on shooting hoops until they've sunk 20. They're not counting, they're just shooting, okay? So it's a repeat until. So I begin the shoot hoops, repeat shooting hoops until I reach 20 baskets. You can theoretically do it as a pretest loop as well. So begin while hoops are less than 20, sink some hoops, end while. You will have to then have a counter for how many, so, begin shoot hoops, set counter to, actually, let me write it out. This is another way you can do the logic. It's not really necessary. I could set hoops to 0. I could technically do it like this. I could do while hoops is less than, I can't work out the logic, less than or equal to 20. No, it's just less than 20. While hoops is less than 20, shoot hoop. If hoop successful, like, I don't know, successful is not really a basketball term, but work with me. Hoops, add 1 to hoops, add 1 to hoops, and while. There you go. You could do it like that. Do you see how that's much more complicated logic than this? The basketball guy isn't going to go, I wonder if I've shot 20. Ooh, let me think. No, okay, I'm going to shoot a hoop. You can because you don't care. It's kind of like the eggs example. It's just keeps on repeating until you reach 20 baskets. Technically, this logic works as well, but it's a hell of a lot more complicated. Yeah? Okay, last one is a football player has 3 attempts to shoot a penalty. Now, the important thing with this is that all 3 attempts are taken. So if you watch football, regardless of whether you get one in, all 3 attempts are taken, okay? It's kind of like basketball. If you think about basketball, when you get a 3 throw in the basketball hoop, you get both of them regardless. If you don't get the first one in, you still get a second one. If you get the first one in, you get a second one. So it's a counted loop because it's 3. There's 3 attempts. Now, so you go for I. Remember from our Zoom chat yesterday, I is like the counter in a for loop. So similar to attempts over here and similar to, hoops here, I is a counter. So for I equals 1, 2, 3. So that will go 1 and 2 and 3. I step on to the next one, allow a penalty shot, and go to the next one. And that's it, guys. That's the answers for that control structure activity.